going to jump straight into introducing our next panel. And that's a panel discussion focused on the data governance research challenges. Chairing this panel is Dr. Siobhan Roach, Director of Industry Programmes at Science Foundation Ireland. So I'm going to hand over to Siobhan.
Thanks so much, Elaine. So we've heard from the various speakers this morning about this afternoon, how digital transformation is creating this ecosystem where we have data on all aspects of the world, and the importance of having these appropriate governance models to harness data, extract value from data, from the global data ecosystem that we are living in, and really around the supporting the responsible use of data, gaining the trust of the public and how we use that data. We heard how Ireland is very well positioned to lead in this area through the consortium approach that we are taking through Empower, where we're bringing together leading academics, policymakers and industry. This is something that we do really well in Ireland. So you'll have heard reference to the previous session to the different research strands of the Empower initiative. And what we're going to do now is talk about the research aspect of it more, so that it will complement the discussion around the policy aspects that has just taken place. So I'd first like to introduce our panel and thank them for joining us today. So we're joined by Aoife Sexton, who's the Chief Privacy Officer and Chief of Product Innovation at Truata, and she's responsible for developing and bringing privacy enhancing technologies to the market, and is also a technology and privacy lawyer herself. We're also joined by Joan Mulville, who's digitalization lead for Siemens in Ireland and is working at the forefront of driving technology adoption in Ireland and working very closely with Irish businesses and helping them along that transformation journey. We have Dan Hayden, who's the Director of Data Strategy at Meta, and Dan is leading a team building global initiatives in privacy and the future of data-driven economy. We then have our 4 centre directors. So we have Professor Brian Fitzgerald, who you met earlier, the Director of LERO. We have Professor Noel O'Connor, who's the CEO of the Insight Data Analytics Research Centre and also Professor in the School of Electronic Engineering at DCU. And we have Professor Vinny Wade, who I believe is having problems with his camera today. So I don't know if we'll actually get Vinny on camera. Vinny is the Director of the ADAPT Centre for Digital Content Technology and is also holds the Professorial Chair of Computer Science and Statistics in Trinity College. And last but not least, we have Professor David Henschel, who's Professor of Molecular Physiology and Neuroscience at the Royal College of Surgeons and Director of the Future Neuro Centre for Neurological Disease. So welcome, everybody. So I'm first to start with a question for Joan. I suppose we talk about data ecosystems and the overall approach that Empower will take through this initiative. And as digitalization lead for Siemens, why is this ecosystem approach to data governance important, where we're bringing together the different actors involved in this area? Why is it important?
Thanks, Siobhan. So I guess I should lead with saying Siemens actually have a charter of trust ourselves, which we started a number of years ago as we moved to becoming a more digital organization and helping businesses with their own digital transformation journey. And we felt it was really important to make sure that we had this charter of trust ourselves across our own value and supply chain. So we started with our own ecosystem. But what I think is really important in terms of digital disruption and transformation is that actually when we look at it and where the real opportunities are to solve the big problems, whether they're societal problems and sustainability, environmental ones, they don't happen within the confines, within the in-frame of 4 walls and a roof of a particular manufacturer, for example, or a particular transport service. They require ecosystem thinking. They require looking at the entire value chain. And that will only work. You can only have that kind of disruption, that kind of disintermediation, where there is collaboration across the parties. So you can build things like platform solutions. So we need to have this. Why Empower is so important, because it's bringing those parties together who might not find it as easy to collaborate or co-opetition, if you can imagine, in outside that environment of research, and it de-risks it for people. So it de-risks the research, but it also de-risks deployment of digital disruption. everyone's been talking about, data as oil. Well, let's talk about it as fuel and take the oil part out of it. But the whole problem is the technology is kind of like it's this engine, and it works. The technology works. Where it's risky is if you have a fuel leak, if your oil leaks, or you've got an oil slick, or there's an unexplained or unplanned explosion. So what we really, when we put something together like this, when we look at something like the framework and the charter that Empower is talking about, what you're doing is you're creating a framework so that's to mitigate against that happening, so that the journey is safer. So when we get into that technology vehicle, when we start digitalizing our society and our businesses, we can do that safe in the knowledge that fuel is safe. It's the fuel is where it's going to go wrong. That's where you have the explosions. That's where you have the oil slick that damages the environment. So what we need to do is make sure that is as robust as it can be. And that's, for me, why Empower is so important, not only from a research point of view and facilitating and accelerating that, but also as we roadmap, and I'm working myself, with businesses on their digital transformation journey, that we know that there is a framework there. As I say, Siemens have been doing this for quite some time in terms of our own charter of trust, but it's just really, really important now that we bring it in beyond just Siemens' own infrastructure, but that we have this really holistic approach across all of the pillars that everyone else has discussed. So it's just a really, really exciting project. I'm really impressed.
Thanks so much, Joan. I think that's a great extension of the data is the new oil analogy in terms of making sure the fuel is safe. I might come to Noel next, just to, I suppose, Joan talked about the importance of that, looking at the entire value chain in this. So from the context of kind of scoping out what it was that Empower was going to focus on from a research perspective, and Mark in his opening address commented on that there was a series of workshops and different approaches that were taken to arrive at what was the competitive program that is ultimately being supported. Maybe you can talk to us about that, and also about the value to a centre such as Insight from engaging in such a multi-stakeholder consortium.
Sure, thanks, Siobhan. I'm delighted to be here, everybody. And I promise I'll try not to introduce yet another analogy for data. I'll stick to oil, sand, or fuel. It's a great question, Siobhan, and I'll do my best to try to answer it. I suppose maybe for the benefit of the audience, first off, let me explain that Insight is the SFI Research Centre for Data Analytics. We mobilise over 450 researchers right across Ireland on many, many different aspects of data science and data analytics. And our mission, put simply, is really to empower better decision making across all aspects of society through the power of data, by unlocking the power of data. So as you can imagine, the Empower spoke, not just because of its name, is very important to us in that mission. It aligns perfectly with our centre-wide activity on trustworthy AI, which is led by Professor Barry O'Sullivan in UCC and Dr. Susan Levy from UCD. It also aligns with our European work, such as that of Professor Edward Curry from Newt University, who has an important leadership role in the Big Data Value Association, now DIRO. And it aligns with multiple other aspects of our research program, such as activities on data engineering, scalability, multimodal data analytics, and of course, interpretable and explainable AI. So we very, very much welcome the establishment of Empower, very excited by it and delighted that Insight can be part of it and support the ambitions of Marcus and the leadership team over the duration of Empower. I think we probably all know by now at this stage of the launch that data is the oil, the sand, the fuel, the raw material for decision making. But whether oil or sand or whatever else you want to refer to it as, we need to be able to refine that raw material in order to be able to really unlock its value. And that, I think, is exactly the role of data governance. But understanding how to do that refinement, how to unlock that value, needs input and engagement from many, many, many stakeholders and different kinds of stakeholders, and hence the need for a national ecosystem, which is exactly what Empower will deliver, as we've heard from a number of speakers now. And how do you build an ecosystem? Well, you build an ecosystem by being as inclusive and as collaborative as possible with all stakeholders. And that's how we got to this point with Empower. Power is the result of research, policy, public engagement, industry, and importantly, funding stakeholders, all coming together to co-design a national value proposition for Ireland in data governance. And I think Joan expressed very, very well the value of that to Ireland Inc. I think it's important to highlight the industry piece there as particularly important, because what industry can do in the context of a funding vehicle like an SFI spoke is to bring interesting problems and challenges to the attention of the research community and help set that agenda in a very collaborative way. And of course, very often they also come with data as well, the necessary raw material. And what that can ultimately lead to is industry partners tapping into the expertise right across that national ecosystem so that we as a nation can collectively tackle those big problems, ensuring that, you know, everyone's a winner ultimately at the end of the day. So this type of engagement ultimately can lead to an ongoing virtuous cycle of innovation between all of those stakeholders in the mix. And that actually is something that we do very, very well in Ireland. It's something that's not easily replicable elsewhere in the world, quite honestly. And I think for that reason, something like Empower truly gives Ireland a USP in this domain internationally and goes a long, long way towards answering that question that Mark posed initially of why Ireland. So I hope that's kind of given some insights into why we believe that this is a truly valuable national undertaking, and delighted to be part of it.
That's great. Thanks so much, Noel. And in terms of the national value proposition and data governance, Vinny, thankfully we can now see you on video, so great to have you back. What are the key research challenges that Empower is going to address, and particularly from, I suppose, an adapt perspective?
Sure. Thanks, Siobhan. And again, delighted to be at the launch today of Empower program. I think that from our perspective, you know, our focus is always in the Adapt Centre is always on artificial intelligence and how it drives digital media technology of the future. And we all know that we have this, today's world is this fusion of the physical and the real world, where things that happen in the digital world are manifest in the real and vice versa. I think that a key point here is that as we move towards the data being used to drive the artificial intelligence, we need to be able to unlock that potential, but do it in a risk careful way. I think from our perspective, the key concerns we're seeing talking to industry and talking to public bodies and talking to the individuals in the street, because we take part in a lot of citizen science type technology expert trials. And what we're hearing is a continual nervousness around how do we understand the privacy issues? How do we understand the risks? Add to that the new legislations that have come in over the last 3 or 4 years, and the acts that are about to be enacted in the next 3. What's happening is there's quite a big logjam in terms of people being able to really leverage the affordances of media, the affordances of AI, and doing it in an appropriate way. So from a Adapt perspective, we're really looking forward to support the Empower program, and particularly looking at aspects of data governance to support privacy protection, and being able to look at the privacy and look at the issues and be able to provide semantic models that would allow us to navigate things like provenance, things like privacy, things like consent, and being able to look at how can we assess AI to be trustworthy both from the organizational perspective, because they've got to manage the risk in using AI across different data sets. And once you start mixing those data sets, you have another level of complexity. But also from the individual's perspective, how can we have the individuals feeling that their data will be well cared for, will be managed, will provide them with the affordances they want, but will have the abilities and strengths to be able to find out what's going on and take it back if they so wish. And then also looking at the ethics of how you design such systems. Anyone who knows anything about data-driven systems and ethical data-driven systems know that you can't just slap ethics on the side of a system. It has to be built into the decisions made all the way through, both from the development teams through to the heads of operations, right the way through to the CEO level. How we can actually look at that kind of conduit and be able to impact appropriately the technology shaping of the future. And I think that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about being able to shape the technology to really suit the future we want, and not a future which, run away of just using technology or just being completely unethical would lead us to. And I think that brings us to the other point about what makes Empower unique. From an ADAPT's perspective, we've always believed in a multidisciplinary approach. I know within the center, we have computer scientists like Dave Lewis looking at semantic web, trustworthy technologies driving the AI standards, and Ray Walsh from the big data and GaiaX perspective. But we've also got from the legal side, Eduardo Celeste, from the data quality side and provenance side, Rob Brennan, and from the sociology side, Afra Kerr from Maynooth. And what that does, it gives you a unique perspective and a unique team that can actually address these problems, because they're multifaceted, and you need in multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary teams to be able to attack them. And again, that comes back to, one of these, why Ireland? One of the big differentiators is that we're able to bring together these key critical skills teams to attack these particular problems at the right time in a way which can really make impact. So ADAPT is really thrilled to be part of the foundation of Empower, and when it was really envisaged, and also now to see it fruition in its launch. And we look forward to the impact it will have in both helping organizations, enterprises, and the public sector be able to unlock the affordances of AI and digital media into the future.
Great, thanks, Benny. And I know, I suppose this morning we've heard a lot about kind of the importance of this area, particularly to the healthcare sector. And I know extracting value from health data is an area of focus for your centre, Vinny. David, I suppose in terms of recognising that it has been very difficult to fully realise the power of data in the healthcare sector and the vast amounts of data that are collected at every stage of the patient journey. And we heard from Derek Mitchell and Iposi about the challenges around gaining the public's trust in how the data is used, and kind of giving that assurance that data will be used responsibly. From a future neuro perspective, as a director of a centre with a focus on neurological diseases, what is the importance of Empower from the perspective of the challenges in the health sector to the use of data, and what's the contribution that your centre will make?
Thanks, Siobhan. So as mentioned, the Future Neuro Centre is focused on the unmet needs of people with neurological disorders and supporting as well the health professionals who care for them. We work with patient organisations, the health service, and industry partners to develop innovative technological solutions that help with diagnosis, treatment, and management. So the researchers from Future Neuro will be leading projects addressing the governance and safe use of patient data. Health data, of course, as we've alluded to earlier, is crucial for research breakthroughs and advancing the triple aim of any healthcare system, including in Ireland, which is to improve patient experience, population health, and reduce per capita costs. So examples of the data we're talking about here, this could be samples such as blood samples, it could be observable characteristics of a person, age and gender, and also data from the patient themselves about how they manage their own care. A major focus of our work in Empower will be around the secondary use of data. So this refers to the use of data which was originally collected for one purpose, the delivery of clinical care, for use for another purpose. And that could be research, or it could be health economics to support medical access programs. There are very large amounts of patient data generated in the day-to-day delivery of healthcare services. And this is stored in patient files and electronic healthcare records. And it's used primarily for the care of that patient. But as we've heard, there's an opportunity to apply data analytics to these collected records to identify new treatment pathways, shorter routes to diagnosis, and improve patient care pathways. So Empower is really important to Future Neuro because it allows us to work closely with the three other centres, with Lero, Insight, and Adapt, to apply their analytical skills, such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, to complex, large health data. Increasingly, we see AI is embedded in products and healthcare services, but health data needs to be treated extremely carefully. And that's why we have privacy-preserving policies and appropriate infrastructures in place, such as health research regulations. I think there's a natural and very understandable public antipathy to data sharing. Patients trust their clinicians with their data, but they're not as confident about sharing data with academia or with commercial enterprises for research purposes. So Future Neuro is going to be leading a series of pre-competitive projects with companies in health informatics and the pharma real-world evidence sector, which will aim to address how we can maximize the value of health data to drive innovation in healthcare and services, while ensuring that we safeguard the best interests of the data owners, i.e. the patients and the custodians of the data, the healthcare authorities. So the type of questions that we'll be exploring are, what are the necessary tools to promote trustworthy use of data? How do we develop a learning health system shaped by real-world outcome data to drive improvements in quality, safety, and efficiency of care? And how do we develop a roadmap for a health regulatory sandbox, which is essentially a safe space to test data and technology advances in healthcare without using real data? And this is important. These projects will be developed in collaboration with industry partners, but without access to actual patient data sets. We also plan to work with Irish SMEs such as RedSync Services, who are keen to explore the data governance considerations of applications of AI to remote healthcare provision. Our approach will be to develop a community of interest of healthcare consumers, practitioners, policymakers and managers, academics, industry partners, and data protection regulators to facilitate collaborative, mutual learning regarding safe and ethical use of health data. Data-driven innovation is making enormous headway. However, the processes, tools, and checks need to be in place to ensure the risks and benefits of the innovation are appropriately balanced and communicated. And that'll be a key role for Future Neuro. So leading the projects from our side are Professor Colin Doherty at Trinity and St. James's Hospital, Dr. Pamela Hussey at DCU, and Professor Kathleen Bennett at RCSI. And collectively, they're going to be bringing their expertise in clinical neurology, patient-centered integrated care delivery, population health, and health informatics standards. So thanks again, Siobhan.
Thank you, David. So I might come to Eva now. We've heard from David and other participants today about what their motivations are for engaging in the Empower initiative. So from the perspective of Truata in developing privacy-preserving technologies, what kind of motivated you as a company to engage in this initiative?
Thanks very much. And again, great to be invited here today to participate in this exciting launch. I suppose, first of all, for those of you who don't know Truata, we're an Irish company based here in Dublin, and our mission is to provide state-of-the-art tools and solutions that can help organizations become more data-driven to unlock valuable insights from data, but to do so in a privacy-preserving, responsible and trustworthy way. So in Truata, you can see we share a very similar vision to Empower in that we believe all organizations can innovate with data whilst acting responsibly and ethically, be it with consumer data or citizens' data. We don't see it as, an either or scenario or a zero-sum game. We see you can innovate and also be responsible and ethical with data. And in Truata, we design and build and bring to market tools and solutions that enable data to be transformed into privacy-preserving data through use of approaches like true anonymization, pseudonymization, and synthetic data. And I think it's important for companies that want to do the right thing and embrace a privacy-centric approach to innovating with data. This will require, in today's world of big data, highly sophisticated tools and solutions that can work at scale, but yet are simple to use and easy to deploy. And I think therein lies a tremendous challenge, a technical challenge, but also a tremendous opportunity, which is where Empower is well placed to play a key role. And I think similar challenges are faced by the public sector bodies as well, because they have increasing regulatory obligations to release government-controlled data. So in addition to the recent Open Data Directive, one only needs to look at what's coming down the track from Europe, and some of these were mentioned already by Barry and others. Things that fall under the European data strategy, such as the Data Governance Act, that talks about reuse of public sector data, refers to a new business model of data intermediaries, and introduces this new concept of data altruism, where individuals and companies will be voluntarily asked to release data for the common good or for societal good. And this last concept of sharing data for societal good came into really sharp focus, I think, during the last year and a half, as it became imperative for policymakers to have timely access to real-time data to drive better decisions on how to overcome some of the COVID pandemic challenges, and to map out the best steps to open up society and the economy. And against this backdrop, many organizations, they really wanted to share data for good, but they really struggled to understand under privacy laws if they were legally permitted to share data that they had already collected for a specific use and now share it for an entirely new purpose. And actually in Truata, we've been working with MasterCard to help MasterCard deliver some recovery insights initiative, some data that has been used to support companies, cities, and governments in their pandemic response. And MasterCard has been able to deliver actionable insights grounded in near real-time spend information that helps decision makers answer their burning questions. And the way we did this was in enabling the data to be truly anonymized and then made ready for analytics to be then delivered. So that's a really good example of how privacy preserving technologies can open up data for analytics and provide insights which can be used for policymakers and others to make decisions. And in Truata, we speak to organizations every day that have ambitions to become more data-driven and to derive better insights from data that would help them design better products and services. However, these companies, and many of them, they're just at the very beginning of their journey to become more data-driven. And they have a myriad of challenges, not least good quality data, access to data. But in addition, what we're hearing from many organizations is privacy paralysis. They really aren't quite confident and certain about how they can use data at scale and what they're permitted to do with that data. And again, back to the role Empower can play, these organizations are looking for sophisticated tools, solutions, and frameworks to help them automate and operationalize good data governance policies to build confidence around safe use and responsible handling of data. And I suppose lastly, I think, since we're talking about data innovation, it would be remiss not to mention one of the key challenges for all organizations, which is the global scarcity of specialist skills and resources in this area. And because of these critical shortages, there's a real danger that only very large companies, and for the most part, technology companies, can attract this type of specialist talent, which actually creates a real problem in that other companies, be it small companies, medium companies, or even non-tech companies, won't be able to access this talent to build either in-house solutions, or vendors won't be able to access it, which can stymie innovation. And so this ultimately can place organizations at a competitive disadvantage in that they will become stymied in their ambitions to become more data-driven. So one of the important things about Empower is it brings together specialist researchers and academics, creates this critical hub of knowledge that will over time deepen expertise and to a certain extent democratize the availability of these resources and make them accessible to companies, and ultimately for the creation of a vibrant ecosystem, which ultimately will help all organizations in how they want to embrace and start to deploy these privacy preserving technologies. So with that, we wish everyone involved, and we're looking forward to being involved ourselves in the Empower program.
Great. Thanks, Aoife. And when you consider the access to a network of 1,000 researchers through this initiative, it's quite a compelling opportunity for companies to engage in. I'm going to come to Brian now. And I suppose from the perspective of Lero Software Centre, one of the challenge areas or platforms within this initiative is focused on data platforms and data marketplaces. Could you maybe speak to that a little from the perspective of your centre?
Sure. So there's two aspects, I think, Siobhan, thank you for this. So data governance as a topic, it really affects software research and our agenda. But also, I think there's an aspect of what software research can offer data governance. So on the first part, as you mentioned, and many people have mentioned, we're moving towards this next generation data intensive adaptive software systems that are existing in a system of systems ecosystem. So very complex. These connected systems, weather, health, climate, smart city, industry 4.0, autonomous vehicle, you name it, they're all generating potential useful data, but it's masses of data. On the other hand, then from those platforms, we want to be more human-centric. So users want to have something highly personalized digital services for the market of one that people talk about. So you've got those two, on one hand, huge amounts of data, on the other hand, a need for much more sophisticated matching of that data to people. And that's a real challenge for the software field to try to deliver those kinds of systems. Also, I guess in software, we data and enterprise architecture are very traditional topics that are much more important now. And organizations have legacy systems and they want to integrate new applications that short-term take advantage of data, for example, and it's critical to be able to bridge between those systems, and that's where the architecture comes into it. And these are just on the technical side. In many domains, I think the business model has changed as well. So technology companies might have sold sensors before. There are billions of sensors deployed around the planet, but the sensor technology alone is not enough. The data from these sensors is where the value is. And then we have to provide an API for customers to leverage that data. That's critical, or they won't survive. So these are challenges from the software side. Likewise, I think access control is something that's changed fundamentally in software systems. It used to be about, access control is role-based and decisions are made at a time of request, but that's not really good enough for data. The usage control is really much more important, and that needs to take into account trust issues, long-lived access to data, GDPR, mutability issues as data changes over time. So usage control needs to be adaptive to these contexts, and they're all things that we have that have influenced our research agenda, which will be important for Empower as we go forward. But I would like to just finish on why I think a software. So I'm biased, I guess. I'm director of a software research center, and everything in the modern world is governed by software. But there are two things that have happened in the software world in the past 20 years, I think, are also critical for data governance. And this could take a long time, but just there are two: agile and open source. So the Agile approach has been matured and developed in the software field. It's premised on being responsive to change and providing faster feedback loops, better customer involvement, data-driven decision-making. And these are all critical for data governance too. So Agile data governance is what Empower is going to focus on as well. And likewise, secondly, open source software. 25 years ago, it was the major threat to Microsoft dominance in the technology domain was not thought to come from a volunteer movement, and it did. So open source create that open culture. Microsoft now, embrace open source better than probably any other company on the planet, or as well as anyone else on the planet. But this open culture has huge advantages. And that's really important, I think, in the area of open data as well. So that's only possible in this context of strong and agile data governance. So there are two things that the software field has led on, I think, that can be very usefully leveraged in data governance also.
Great, thanks so much, Brian. And I'm going to come to Dan, who's been waiting patiently throughout the session to give Dan the last word in this session. So kind of coming back to this ecosystem approach that is at the heart of Empower, where it enables this safe environment for companies, academia and policymakers to work together to drive innovation, and kind of speaking to the open innovation that Brian has just been referring to. How important is this to Meta as a company?
Thanks, Siobhan. And it is, as ever, the difficult task and also privilege to be the last word on the table, not simply either to repeat people or to say, I agree. But I'll try to go one beyond that while also saying, I agree. And just first to thank SFI and all of the team behind Empower for their work to convene this group. But I think actually from the conversation we've had even today, all of these disparate elements, these disparate expertise, and the depth of expertise we see in the room is actually a great illustration of the kind of the potential of this collaboration. And it's critically important to bring these groups together in this way. And in fact, the challenges we'll see in the kind of data governance and ethics space require that. They demand this collaboration across different disciplines because the challenges don't belong to any one discipline. Our company has a huge base in Dublin, as do our peers. So, and I think it's fair to say it's high time that the ecosystem around that, the academic and civil society ecosystem, grows in concert with that concentration. So I think we're really excited for the opportunity to contribute to and benefit from nurturing that community, contributing to it, and building the network across this. And this is a great first step doing that. I lead a co-design lab at Meta, focused on designing better privacy experiences for people with a design-led method. And our mission is to collaborate and prototype, build, and share best practices across those areas with a user lens. And I think through the conversations that I've heard so many elements that are critically important to our work. But a couple of things I'd like to call out. First is, I think Empower's goal to address these kind of common industry and public challenges have extremely high levels of complexity. They're difficult problems. They are in many respects like not fully understood problems. And they will require, as they are inherently socio-technical questions, a spanning of disciplines, a spanning of different domains, collaboration between those domains that can only be realized when groups like this come together. And that's especially true for the kind of data ecosystems questions, because the level of complexity massively increases, and all the questions around data ownership, governance, transparency, control for individual users move from being almost linear and one-to-one to being one-to-many and many-to-many, and the levels of complexity really grow. And with that, similarly, the need for different groups to collaborate and work openly and transparently and through leading edge research in that space grows as well, because the answers must be developed in a way that's legitimate and well understood. They cannot come only from industry or indeed only from academic spaces. They have to emerge from collaborations between both. Like some of the areas we're very focused on are around privacy enhancing technologies, like those that Eva spoke about, especially around differential privacy, multi-party computation, and the kind of quality of, say, anonymization online, very powerful tools potentially for end users, privacy to be assured, but the degree to which and the level at which we legitimize the approaches and techniques that are developed in industry through academic collaborations is critical. Otherwise, they cannot be meaningful, they cannot be validated, they cannot be accountable in the ways that we need and that people need. So our aspiration is to support and grow that ecosystem, and it will only succeed, I think, in a way that's collective. So our kind of hope here is that we contribute to an ecosystem and look 5 and 10 years down the line toward the kind of greater network and community we can build across this, and what it can look like, not just for the first phase of research, but in future, and toward the development of future computing platforms and issues and challenges that are not yet foreseen. We need to kind of invest in the ecosystem and capacity today for that new space. So I mean, I think that's the main thing. Just to say thank you again to SFI, to our collaborators so far. It's been a pleasure to be part of the journey to date, and very much looking forward to being part of this community as it grows and develops.
Great. Thanks for that, Dana. I think you nicely summarized in terms of it. It's an incredibly complex area, and it demands, I think the word used, collaboration across disciplines. And this is really at the heart of what we as a funder are trying to achieve through bringing different centres with their respective expertise and disciplines together to address these challenges on a societal and an economic level. So it's with that kind of a lens in mind that Empower was established, also recognising, as was alluded to earlier, the significant portion of EU data that's held in Ireland, the significant concentration of tech companies in Ireland, that it's a real opportunity for Ireland to develop leadership in the area. And we believe certainly through this initiative that Empower is well positioned to develop this leadership through this multi-stakeholder, multidisciplinary approach, and that, led by world-class researchers leading the different centres that are involved. So we're really delighted to be supporting the initiative and really look forward to seeing the outputs that come from it. So I'm going to hand back over to Elaine now, and I'd like to thank the panel for joining me today.
And thanks also to Siobhan for chairing that last panel discussion. And thanks to everyone for holding out with us. I know we've run over time, but I'm sure we can agree from today's session that data is a fast-moving, dynamic, evolving resource, and it requires urgent attention to governance. If it is indeed the new oil or sand or fuel or whatever we're going to call it, we have an opportunity now to ensure that this is used well, that we extract its value and potential for good and mitigate against its potential for more harmful or negative impacts. The most important takeaway for you to take from today is that if you're looking to collaborate with Empower on any projects, you can reach out at www.empower-datagovernance.ie or email info@empower-datagovernance.ie. Thank you to all of our speakers, to the organisers for this virtual session, and of course to the audience for your attention today. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you very much.